2018 Formula 1 season look like without Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel? Thank you to Mal the Mapper for the idea. I never would have thought of this, but as said, and as I replied, this could be quite interesting. Who wins between Verstappen, Raikkonen and Bottas? And just to clarify, in this scenario, yes, Bottas and Raikkonen have no teammate. We kick things off with round 1, doing Australia, as we tend to kick things off at Albert Park, or well, at least used to. And it would be a brilliant start for Kimi Raikkonen, because much like his Ferrari debut back in 2007, he will be claiming pole position for the Australian Grand Prix, and he would convert that pole position into a race victory ahead of the homeboy Daniel Ricciardo, getting his first podium at his home event. He would get the fastest lap as well, but let's just remember 2018, you did not get a point for fastest lap. No, I did not forget that while I was working all this out, then had to go back and take out the points for fastest lap I'd added on. But rounding off the podium, it would be Fernando Alonso with his first podium since his Ferrari days. It's been quite a while for him. He's back on the podium this time out. And now it's on to Bahrain for the second race of the season. It would be a second pole position in a row for Kimi Raikkonen, although he would still end up retiring in the race after that incident in the pit lane with his mechanics. And it would instead be Valtteri Bottas taking the victory spoils, as he would go on to claim his first race win of the season, actually getting a win this season, unlike himself in actual 2018, but that's not where the headlines would be in this race. No. The headlines would be with P2 and P3, as Pierre Gasly not only scores his first points in Formula 1, he gets his first podium finish in only his 7th race in Formula 1. He's on the podium ahead of Kevin Magnussen for Haas. Haas getting their first podium in Formula 1, and K-Mag his second podium, his first being of course Australia back in 2014. Haas going from looking like a bunch of wankers in Australia to looking like a bunch of legends in Bahrain. However, Pierre Gasly would not be the only driver to score their first points this evening, as further down the grid, after a couple of post-race penalties for Sergio Perez and Brendan Hartley, Charles Leclerc would find himself bolstered up into P10, scoring his first points in Formula 1 as well. Now we take to China for the Chinese Grand Prix, where Kimi Raikkonen makes it 3 from 3 in terms of pole positions. He is once again on pole position, third race in a row. However, that pole position, it would turn into a P3 finish in the Grand Prix ahead of Valtteri Bottas, as Daniel Ricciardo would come sweeping through the field, overtaking left, right and centre to go on to take the race victory in China, his first win of the season, while his teammate would not have that incident with Sebastian Vettel, because Vettel wouldn't be there to have an incident with. And now it's off to Azerbaijan for round 4. It's pole position not for Kimi Raikkonen, but instead for Valtteri Bottas this time, and the race would still end in heartbreak for him, as he would still get that puncture, and then in the late stages of the race, and it would end in retirement for him. It would also end in retirement for the 2 Red Bulls, who would still come to blows, and it would be Kimi Raikkonen surviving it all to end up with the race victory this afternoon in Azerbaijan, ahead of Sergio Perez, finishing off in second place for his first podium finish of the season, ahead of Carlos Sainz for his first podium ever in Formula 1. While further down the grid, it's first points for Brendan Hartley, as he gets a P8 finish this afternoon. So 4 rounds in, let's take a quick look at the championship. We've only had one repeat winner, that's Kimi Raikkonen. He is currently leading the championship on 65 points. He's a little bit ahead of Valtteri Bottas in second place on 51 points, while Daniel Ricciardo currently rounds out the top 3 on 43 points. He's actually level with Fernando Alonso, who's in 4th, also on 43 points. And then 5th place, rounding out the top 5, is currently Nico Hülkenberg on 32 points. 6th place is going the way of Carlos Sainz on 27 points. 7th, you'll find Max Verstappen on 24 points. 8th is Sergio Perez on 21. 9th is Stoffel van Dorn on 20 points. And then Pierre Gasly and Kevin Magnussen are actually tied on 19 points. However, it's Pierre Gasly intent on countback. As for the Constructors' Championship, it's pretty close at the top at the moment, as Red Bull lead the way on 67 points, ahead of Ferrari on 65 and the Mercedes on 51, the same points as in the Drivers' Championship, because they only have one driver. So it's pretty close up there at the top at the moment. However, I expect that to change. I fully expect Red Bull to be rocketing further ahead, because they have 2 drivers. But 4th place is currently going the way of McLaren. It's currently sitting on 63 points. They're only 4 points ahead of Renault, who are on 59 points. It's a bit of a gap back to Force India, currently currently sitting in 6th place on 28 points, and then 7th place is currently going the way of Toro Rosso on 23 points. 8th currently sits Sauber on 21. Haas are only a couple points behind them on 19 points, and then Williams are sitting on 8 currently. Championships aside, we now head on towards the Spanish Grand Prix for the 5th round of the season. Mercedes in the last few years have typically been pretty freaking strong in Barcelona, and this time is no different, as Valtteri Bottas claims pole position for this Grand Prix and he turns that into a race victory ahead of Max Verstappen, finishing 2nd place here, the place where he got his first race win a couple years previous in 2016, and it's his teammate Daniel Ricciardo who rounding off the podium this afternoon. Onwards to Monaco now for round 6. It's the exact same pole sitter and it ends up being the exact same race winner. Daniel Ricciardo still manages to cling on for that Monaco race victory. He ends up getting the redemption from 2016 when Red Bull fucked up his pit stop and, well, he lost the win thanks to that, but that did not happen in 2018. He still had problems, but he managed to hold on, but it was not Sebastian Vettel challenging him for the win. It was Kimi Raikkonen who ended up finishing in 2nd place ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who finishes off in 3rd. And yes, further down the field, this still happens later in the race. Now it's hop across the pond to Canada for the next race of the season for the Canadian Grand Prix. Valtteri Bottas turns his P3 finish in Monaco momentum into a pole position in Canada momentum, as he ends up quickest in qualifying, and he can turn that quickest in qualifying into a P1 in the Grand Prix. This season going a lot better for him than it actually did. 2018 wasn't a brilliant season for Valtteri. He's having a great season here so far as he wins the Canadian Grand Prix ahead of Max Verstappen in 2nd place with the fastest lap as well to boot, while Daniel Ricciardo rounds off the podium in 3rd place. It's the same podium from the Spanish Grand Prix. The French Grand Prix comes up next, and Valtteri Bottas would be on pole position once again this season, and of course he would actually have a much better French Grand Prix than he actually did, because Sebastian Vettel wouldn't be there to hit him at the first corner of the race. However, despite Valtteri not getting hit, I do think Max Verstappen would have ended up beating him to the race win, and it would be Max Verstappen winning the race ahead of Bottas, who would finish in 2nd, and then Kimi Raikkonen finishing off the podium in 3rd place. And now for round 9, it is off to Austria for the Austrian Grand Prix. It is yet another pole position for Valtteri Bottas. He's been very, very good in qualifying this season, and he is continuing that streak as he takes pole position. However, he still ends up retiring from the race, which gives a golden opportunity to Kimi Raikkonen to really close up on his championship rival, as Valtteri has taken the lead by this point in the season in the championship, so this gives Kimi a chance to close up, and he does with a 2nd place finish in this Grand Prix ahead of Romain Grosjean, giving Haas another podium this season. I'm gonna be honest, I actually kind of forgot that Haas weren't terrible in 2018. But it's still Max Verstappen who ends up taking the race victory. Round 10 takes us to Silverstone, the home of motorsport, the home of British motorsport, whatever you want to call it. But it's Kimi Raikkonen who ends up taking the pole position. It's not a British driver, it's a Finnish driver who takes pole position. And that Finnish driver turns pole position into a race victory. He doesn't hit Hamilton at the opening corners because Hamilton isn't there to be hit. But there is still a Mercedes in the race, and that Mercedes ends up finishing in P2. Valtteri Bottas in 2nd place ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, who does round off the podium in P3. Championship now, and in terms of the Drivers' Championship, it's still Kimi Raikkonen leading the way. However, but it is not by very much. Kimi Raikkonen leading on 153 points, while Valtteri Bottas is only 1 point behind him on 152. It is a bit of a gap back to Daniel Ricciardo on 225, and then Max Verstappen in 4th on 116. So really, the championship battle has shaped itself out. It's Bottas v Raikkonen, it seems, for this championship, and then Verstappen and Ricciardo, they seem to be in their own private battle, as there's quite a gap back to 5th place man Nico Hülkenberg on 68 points. It's only 3 points back from that to Fernando Alonso on 65 points, and then it's just 6 points further back you'll find Kevin Magnussen on 59 points. On 57 points is Carlos Sainz in 8th place, 9th place is currently Esteban Ocon on 45 points, and then Sergio Perez rounds off the top 10 currently on 40 points. And in the constructors, just as I predicted, Red Bull have torn away up at the front. They're currently on 241 points, while Ferrari and Mercedes are on the points I just mentioned. In the drivers, 153 and 152 respectively, Ferrari ahead of Mercedes. 4th place is going the way of Renault at this current moment in time, while McLaren are rounding off the top 5 on 88 points. Bit of a gap between them, but it's not a massive gap back to Force India on 85 points. Only 3 points between McLaren and Force India. Not that big of a gap, but it's not that a huge gap either back to Haas on 77 points in 7th place. 8th place is currently going the way of Sauber on 41 points. 9th is currently Toro Rosso on 37. Not a massive gap between them either. And then Williams are kind of on their own on 11 points. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, then why not subscribe? I have more videos like this, taking a team out of a season and seeing what happens. And I have more planned. I might do this just like this for 2017, take Vettel and Hamilton out of it. I have planned to do 2014 through to 2016 without Mercedes. I have planned to look at some of the Red Bull years in the early 2010s without Red Bull. Maybe some of the Ferrari years in the early 2000s without Ferrari. I have more videos like this planned and I have a bunch of other content, and the season's about to kick off. The season is kicking off rather. So subscribe for more, drop a like if you're enjoying it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get back to the video. And now as we head away for Silverstone, we reach the halfway point of the season, which is at the German Grand Prix at the Hockenheim Ring in Germany. Of course it's in Germany, I just said it's the German Grand Prix, but a brilliant lap sees Valtteri Bottas take pole position for this Grand Prix. Mercedes' home race, and that pole position, it translated into a race victory for Mercedes at their home event. In a race which is slightly changing conditions. Of course there's no Sebastian Vettel crash because he's not there to crash off, but regardless, it's Kimi Raikkonen, the one Ferrari on the grid, who finishes up in 2nd place, and then Max Verstappen will round off the podium in 3rd place. And now it's off to Hungary for the final race before the summer break. It is once again Valtteri Bottas on pole position. He has been an absolute monster in qualifying this season, and that is continuing in Hungary. Pole position for him. It does not translate into a race win though, sadly. It ends up being P3 for him, while Kimi Raikkonen ends up taking the victory spoils with a race win as they continue their battle in the Drivers' Championship for the really championship crown, kind of just trading wins at this point in time. One wins, then the other wins, then the other wins, trading the championship lead back and forth. But in between them, you find Daniel Ricciardo finishing up in 2nd place with a strong result for Red Bull, while his teammate ends up retiring. Gotta love that Renault engine. At this point in time, everybody heads off for the summer break, and when they return from wherever the bloody hell they've gone off to in the summer break, we're at the Belgian Grand Prix, where Force India's points from the first half of the season in the Constructors has all been voided, and they've been re-entered basically under the same name, Force India. Just they have a British flag now. We all remember what went on there. But speaking about the team that was Indian and is now has the British flag attached to it, it would be a brilliant start to the second half of the season for them, as Esteban Ocon would get his first ever pole position in Formula 1. It would be a front row lockout for the match. Sergio Perez would be alongside him on the front row, and neither of them would be able to translate it into a race victory. Esteban Ocon would end up finishing in P4, while Sergio Perez would stand on the podium for the second time this season with a P3 finish. He would be standing behind Valtteri Bottas, who would be finishing up in 2nd place in this race, while Kimi Raikkonen retiring from the race to end up with, after a bit of a melee at the start of the race, Valtteri would be outscoring his rival, which would be brilliant for his chances in the championship. But it would be Max Verstappen, the homeboy, taking the race win. He is half Belgian rather. He is half Belgian. He will be standing on the podium, on the top step of the podium at his home event. But further down the field, it is first points in Formula 1 for Sergei Sirotkin down at Williams, a driver that I always forget was on the grid in 2018. But he finishes up in P10, scoring his first ever points finish in Formula 1. Up next is the Italian Grand Prix, the home of Ferrari, and Ferrari would be absolutely delighted with pole position for Kimi Raikkonen, as he did actually have in real life, of course, but he wouldn't have Hamilton hounding him for the race victory. He would have a pretty easy time of it on his way to the race victory, as he would convert this into a race win in front of all the Tifosi. Ferrari's first home win since Fernando Alonso in 2010. It would still be Mercedes in 2nd place, though. It would be Valtteri Bottas finishing up in 2nd. Raikkonen outscoring Bottas, trying to get a little bit of ground back after that retirement in Belgium. And then Max Verstappen would end up rounding off the podium as his consistency continues. His consistency of being relatively up there when his car isn't freaking dying on him. And well, not die on him is exactly what his car would do in Singapore for the Singapore Grand Prix. Round 15 of the season, Max Verstappen would find himself on pole position on the streets of Singapore, and that pole position he would translate it into a race victory on Sunday on a track that isn't the easiest to overtake on. You can definitely overtake in Singapore, but it's street tracks. They're not always the easiest to overtake on. He would take the victory ahead of Valtteri Bottas, and then Kimi Raikkonen rounding off the podium. Round 16 takes us to Russia for the Russian Grand Prix, a track where Valtteri Bottas scored his first ever race victory in Formula 1 the previous year in 2017, and his strong form in Russia would continue this time out, as he would take pole position, fastest lap, and race victory in a rather dominant race. He did did tend to be very, very strong in Sochi, and he was still this time out, as he wins ahead of Kimi Raikkonen, further extending his advantage at the top of the championship, and then Max Verstappen rounds off the podium. It's the same podium as we've had the last 2 races. But as we head off to Japan for round 17 of the season, it would be a different podium lineup. Same guy at the top of it though, Valtteri Bottas, still at very, very strong. He's got a bit of momentum going here, and he would take yet another hat-trick of pole position, fastest lap and race victory ahead of Max Verstappen in second place, and then it will be Daniel Ricciardo rounding off the podium in P3, while Kimi Raikkonen finishing down in 4th place, losing quite a bit of ground in the championship. As you can see, when we now look at the standings, it is 296 points for Valtteri Bottas at the top of the standings. He is 30 points ahead now of Kimi Raikkonen, who is in second place on 266. It's a bit of a gap back of almost 40 points back to Max Verstappen in third on 229, while he's kind of been left his teammate behind. It's now quite a bit of a gap back to Daniel Ricciardo on 182 points. And behind that, there is quite a few people on the same level of points. Tied on 87 points in 5th and 6th, we have Sergio Perez and Esteban Ocon. The two Force Indias are level pegging on points, but they're not the only ones, as Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg are also level on points in 7th and 8th on 86 points. Of course, the one that's ahead is off of countback. In 9th place, you will find Carlos Sainz on 85 points. He's not tied with anyone, and then nor tied with anyone is Fernando Alonso on 83 points. In the Constructors, though, there is not anybody tied on anything. Red Bull have romped away up in the front. They're not that far away from being able to secure the Constructors Championship, rather. It will be their 5th Constructors Championship. They're on 411 points, while Mercedes and Ferrari 296 against 266 respectively. Renault are in 4th on 171 points, and not too far behind them, about 30 points or so. Back from that, you will find Haas on 138 points. A further 30 points behind them, you'll find McLaren on 108 points. In 6th place, well, in 7th, it is Force India. Of course, as I said, the 99 points that they scored in the Constructors for the first half of the season, they got voided. They're on 75 points, 5 ahead of Sauber, who's sitting 8th place at the moment in time. Toro Rosso are sitting in 9th on 61 points, and then finally Williams are still at the bottom of the table. They're kind of on their own on 22 points. From Japan, it's a hop across to the US of A for the American Grand Prix, the United States Grand Prix rather, in Austin, Texas. And well, Kimi Raikkonen had a very good weekend here. He got his first race win since 2013 here at the 2018 US Grand Prix. It wouldn't be his first race win since 2013, but it would be still be a race victory for him, as he would win the race from pole position this afternoon, while Max Verstappen sits in second place and Valtteri Bottas in third. So Kimi getting some crucial ground back in the Drivers' Championship by outscoring his rival Bottas, his countryman, his fellow Finn. It's taken me till now to realise it's a Finnish battle for the championship. Why is it taking me until round frickin' 18 to realise that? But he's gained back some crucial ground, and with Max Verstappen finishing up second place in the race, even with Daniel Ricciardo's retirement, that puts Red Bull in striking distance of winning the Constructors' Championship. They can win it at the very next race, the Mexican Grand Prix for round 19 in Mexico City. Red Bull heading into this race, they sit on 429 points. Mercedes are the only ones left who can stop them. They're on 318 points as Bottas' total. Ferrari are out of it, but it would take a miracle for Mercedes, quite frankly, to stop Red Bull from winning the Constructors here in Mexico. But it would be a brilliant start for Red Bull, as Daniel Ricciardo would end up taking pole position for this Grand Prix. He would still end up retiring from the race, of course, because starting on pole in Mexico is freaking cursed, I swear. But it would be his teammate taking the race victory. And that race victory, those 25 points, that would be enough from Red Bull to wrap up their 5th Constructors' Championship with a gap of 120 points between Red Bull and Mercedes. It would be too much with only 86 points left available to score across the last 2 races. The gap would be too big. Red Bull are Constructors' champions, despite the efforts of Mercedes to stop them, with Bottas finishing in 3rd place behind Kimi Raikkonen in 2nd place. Kimi's trying to close it back up. He's keeping the Drivers' Championship fight alive. But as we head on to round 20, the penultimate race of the season, Valtteri Bottas does have an opportunity to wrap up the Drivers' Championship this weekend, with the gap sitting at 17 points at this present moment in time. If Valtteri Bottas manages to outscore Kimi Raikkonen by 9 points or more, then that'll be it. Valtteri Bottas will be the driver's champion. He's off to a brilliant start trying to win the championship, as he ends up taking pole position for this Grand Prix. But unfortunately, it would not turn into a podium for him. He would actually end up finishing down in P4 in this Grand Prix. It would be Max Verstappen taking the race victory. He would still get hit by Esteban Ocon, but Hamilton wouldn't be there to freaking go past him, you know? So Max Verstappen, he still gets hit, but he still gets the race victory. So he maybe would have been slightly less pissed off after the race. But sadly for Bottas, he gets outscored by his rival. Kimi Raikkonen finishes up in second place, while Daniel Ricciardo makes it a Red Bull double podium as he finishes up in third place. But Kimi Raikkonen outscoring Valtteri Bottas by 6 points. That is crucial for him in the Drivers' Championship, as this is how things shape up heading into the final race. Valtteri Bottas leads the way on 338 points. Kimi Raikkonen is in second place. This is the Drivers' Championship fight. The gap is 11 points. 338 against 327. Max Verstappen is currently confirmed to be finishing in P3 in this championship, as he's sitting on 297 points. He's on his own. And Daniel Ricciardo likewise is solidly fourth place on 197 points. But behind there is still some battles going on here, as there's quite a bit of a scrap going on for P5. Nico Hülkenberg is currently sitting in 5th place on 110 points. Sergio Perez is currently the man in 6th place on 99 points. Only 11 points back from that. Only further 3 back from that. 14 behind his teammate sits Carlos Sainz on 96 points. Kevin Magnussen is still technically in contention mathematically for that, but the 18-point gap, it's a bit of a big gap, and likewise with Esteban Ocon in 9th place on 89 points. It is still mathematically possible, but it would be difficult. The more realistic battle going on for Esteban Ocon is the one with Kevin Magnussen and also kind of Fernando Alonso in the 8, 9, 10 battle, as Fernando Alonso sits on 83 points, Kevin Magnussen 92, Esteban Ocon 89, and then you have those who are sitting outside the top 10 who have their own battles going on there. And finally, in the Drivers' Championship, Red Bull, as I said, they've confirmed their championship. That's all wrapped up. Red Bull on 494 points. They're confirmed as the Constructors' Champions. But there's still a battle going on for second place. Same battles in the Drivers' Championship, 338 against 327. Renault are confirmed to be finishing in P4 at this present moment in time on 206 points, while Haas are sitting in 5th on 52 points. They're basically confirmed in P5 for this one. McLaren are on 118 points. They're not confirmed yet in P6 because Sauber are only 18 points behind them on 100 points. Nor are they confirmed in P7. Racing Point, or Force India, whatever you want to call them, they're on 89 points in 8th place. Only 11 points back from them. On 74 points, you'll find Toro Rosso in 9th place, and then Williams are confirmed to be finishing last. They're on 23 points. But now let's head off to that final round of the season, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix for 2018. Valtteri Bottas has a very, very strong start to his weekend. It's a very, very strong start to trying to claim his first Drivers' Championship, as he claims pole position for this Grand Prix. But points don't come in qualifying, points come in the race, and that's where it would count for Kimi Raikkonen to try and overtake Bottas and try and hope Bottas falls back a bit. But unfortunately, the Finn falling back would be Raikkonen, as he would retire from the Grand Prix, while Valtteri Bottas goes on to claim a P3 finish, and with that, his first ever championship in Formula 1. Daniel Ricciardo would end up finishing ahead of him in second place, while Max Verstappen makes it 3 wins in a row to round out the season. He has a very, very strong end to this season, it must be said. As for the battles elsewhere in the grid, the battle for 5th place, Nico Hülkenberg does end up retiring from the race. However, Carlos Sainz's 4th place finish, it is enough to get him within touching distance of his teammate, but it's not enough, and Nico Hülkenberg does manage to hold on for that P5 finish in the championship. And likewise with Sergio Perez, he gets very, very close as well with his P6 finish. However, it's just not enough, and he's just behind Carlos Sainz, just by one singular point. In the Magnussen Alonso Ocon battle at the bottom end of the top 10, and then it's Magnussen coming out on top with his P8 finish, making him score just enough points to hang on ahead of Esteban Ocon in 9th, and then Fernando Alonso in 10th place. And here's how the final championship standings end up working out. Valtteri Bottas is your driver's champion for this 2018 season without Sebastian Vettel or Lewis Hamilton. 353 points for the Finn. For the other Finn on the grid, for Kimi Raikkonen, he sits on 327 points after his season came to a bit of a unfortunate end with that retirement in the final race of the season. Max Verstappen is sitting in third place in the end. He rounds off the top three on 322 points, while his teammate is in kind of no man's land on fourth on 215 points for Daniel Ricciardo. Nico Hülkenberg rounds out the top five on 110 points, while Carlos Sainz's teammate is on 108 points in sixth place. Seventh place goes the way of Sergio Perez on 107 points, that's 1 point behind the Spaniard, and then eighth place is going the way of Kevin Magnussen on 96 points. Esteban Ocon finishes off in 9th on 89 points, while Fernando Alonso rounds off the top 10 on 85 points. The first person outside the top 10 in P11 is Charles Leclerc on 77 points, while Romain Grosjean is exactly 11 points behind him on 66 points in P12. P13 is going the way of Pierre Gasly on 57 points, while Stoffel Van Dorn, the second McLaren driver, he is finishing off in 14th on 35 points. Marcus Ericsson finishes off just 2 points behind that on 33 points in 15th. Then it's a tie on 18 points between Lance Stroll and Brendan Hartley on P16 and P17. However, Stroll gets it on countback. And then finally, there's Sergei Sirotkin on 5 points in 18th place. Everybody scored points this season. I think that might very well be the first time I've done one of these videos where everybody scores points. Then as for the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull, as I've said, they're Constructors' Champions at 537 points for the Milton Keynes-based Austrian team. Mercedes and Ferrari, well, same points as the Drivers' Championship. 353 points for Mercedes, finishing off in second place, and then 327 for Ferrari. Renault, as I said, they're confirmed fourth place. They finished fourth place on 218 points, while Haas finished in fifth on 162 points. McLaren end up in sixth place on 120 points, while Sauber finish up just 10 points behind them on 110 points. Force India end up on 97 points in 8th place, while 9th goes the way of Toro Rosso on 75 points, and Williams are in 10th on 23 points. And if anyone's curious, if Force India didn't have that mess in the middle of the season and their first half of the season points didn't get voided, they would have ended up on 196 points, which would have placed them in 5th place. But there we have it. 2018 without Lewis Hamilton or Sebastian Vettel is at its end. That was actually pretty freaking interesting to see who would win between Bottas, Raikkonen and Verstappen. In the end, it's Valtteri Bottas who ends up having a much better 2018 season than he actually had. Because he finished behind Raikkonen and Verstappen to end up with in this season. But then he actually ended up leapfrogging them if you take the top two in this season out of it. So pretty interesting. I think I might do this for 2017 as well. It might be quite interesting. Just take Hamilton and Verstappen and Vettel out of it and then just see what happens. See who ends up coming out on top, you know? But that's for another video. I'm gonna leave this one here. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.